Hello and welcome to Flex That Worx. I'm joined here by Graham Clarke, CEO of Workspace, and my name is Anne-Marie Murphy. Very pleased to have you here today with us. In today's episode, we are going to follow on a topic that we would have talked a bit about in previous episodes. That is new members for your space. Most operators are looking to grow their membership, and we would often talk about something like the total addressable market, whereby you're thinking about all of the potential members that you could have using your space, be it for day passes or continuous membership. Oftentimes, operators are all competing for the same audience, but if you actually broaden your lens a little bit, there may well be people in your locality or visiting your locality who you haven't actually considered at all. And today we're going to take a deep dive into one of those groups. So we were thinking about the fact that most co-working spaces are designed for a type of member that you as an operator probably already understand. But there's actually a growing group that a lot of people might not have consciously designed for, even though we see these people in everyday life. And that is the creator, the solopreneur, people whose work depends on content, publishing, being visible, and not just in emails or meetings. They're actually visible because they're building their own personal brands. They don't necessarily need a very cool space. I think that's an opinion that maybe some people have that's not fully accurate, but they do need spaces that support the way in which they actually need to work now with the work that they're doing going forward, be it whether they've come from careers and this is a big change for them, or they're brand new into the working market and they're working for themselves. So in this episode, Graham and myself are going to explore whether creators represent an overlooked membership opportunity potentially for operators and what it would actually mean if you're going to serve them really well. All right, so Graham, let's kick off. So who are these creators really? How are they different from, say, freelancers or remote workers that operators would already be familiar with?
I suppose they need hard access to hardware, Anne-Marie. A lot of what we speak about and a lot of what the industry is selling is desks, right? Meeting room time and all of that kind of stuff. And the big competing factor a lot of the time with desks is like I can set up an office at home really easy. It's far more difficult to set up a podcast studio because they just take up more space. In theory, obviously you can have a little compact corner where you put things in, but there's a theory out there that there's a big enough audience there for content creators, as you're saying, and the way people are working and the way people are making money these days is rapidly changing. Historically, co-working spaces were for people that worked off laptops, but now, you look at like the Irish 30 under 30, like they're all making serious cash out of being influencers, which all comes along with content creation. And I feel like an absolute dinosaur when I read these lists because I have absolutely no clue who they are in a lot of instances.
Were you not on the 30 under 30, no?
No, never made it.
Not this year.
Not this year.
Yeah. I think it definitely comes down to mindset. I think their attitude to work is just different, like who they work with and where they work and the times they work, all of that is a bit different. Mm-hmm. And I think people who are probably working for themselves and freelancers and stuff to date, maybe operators felt like, oh, we've got some beanbags over there. They don't have to sit at a desk, like box ticked. Whereas you may well have people who need to shoot a bit of content and they don't need a huge setup. They can just hold their iPhone, but they do want a bit of a wall with a bit of design on it, and it can't be the one cool wall all the time. Mm-hmm. So maybe it's about having 2 or 3 locations that are suitable. Maybe it's about having a spot that's quiet enough, that there's not like massive noise if they want to go live and host something. Maybe it's about having a space that they can have somebody in to sit with them and do a bit of a collaboration, because that's a big piece of that type of work. So your guest pass piece becomes important. I suppose it's about like really mapping out the ways they work. Also, there's an element of things being a little bit unpredictable as well. So I think having like multiple kind of breakout spaces or smaller spaces they can use maybe a little bit ad hoc or unplanned potentially is important as well.
Yeah, but again, come back to my original point about hardware. As we live in a lot of shared economy, right? People are sharing rideshare lifts. People are sharing their houses with Airbnb. There's people are sharing cars with things like GoCar and other services like that. So, as an individual who may want to create content ad hoc or the odd time, investing in the equipment, which is forever updating and changing, and could be an investment that's not worthwhile. So again, your offering as a co-working space could be as simple as a bit of kit that's there for everybody to use. Next step up would be the provision of a podcast studio, some shape or form, where somebody can come in, the setup is there, they just crack on and they get going. And then you can go, and again, the next step then is a set, right? Like you see the lads, Roy Keane, Gary Neville and the lads have a set that they come in and it looks like a little clubhouse. But again, we're talking absolute different levels of offering and operator type, right? And then, me, I'm always going to come back to brass tacks. It's always going to be outcome. As an offering, it's great and wonderful, but which offering suits your business? And, do you have the space to have a podcast studio? Let's just, shoot the dart into the middle. And then the next thing is, do you have the interest and demand to let that sit idle for a while you build up the demand for it,
Yeah, and we'll definitely have a chat about how you actually attract this audience into your space for sure. So I think in terms of how they're different, probably maybe it's useful to put yourself into their shoes a little bit. If you haven't met anybody doing this type of work, I would ask the question. I know people who work in this area of work, they're developing personal brands. If you're looking for them, it's anyone who's trying to develop a personal brand has a presence that's most likely online, frankly. And they're probably doing either affiliate work, maybe online sales, or they have their own product or service that they're marketing. It's useful, I think, to get into their shoes, ask the question. If you know anybody, ask them what it is they're kind of looking for, what's valuable to them. And then it could be the case, I think every space has a bit of nothing space in it. Like every co-working space has a few corners that are largely unused, not in a valuable way anyway. They're certainly not making you money. And while somebody might not be renting the corner from you, by just having the lens of that type of worker looking around your space, it might be the case that you make some changes here and there and all of a sudden you've got 3 locations that are really interesting for that type of worker in addition to a desk that makes your space a little bit more attractive for them. So by getting a little bit creative yourself, you might find ways that you could bring in this type of audience. In terms then of, and just to say on the mindset piece there as well, a lot of these people are working at home. They're trying to film in their kitchens, they're trying to film in nice looking locations outdoors. If the weather is poor and they don't want to film in their home again, or they can't for some reason, it's really, really valuable to them to know that there's a place that they can go to and get work done. The other thing I'd say about this type of mindset is oftentimes this work is not yet taken fully seriously. To your point, there's massive money being made by a lot of people in this industry. And I think it's high time that everybody takes it quite seriously now and starts actually providing what they need. And that's really going to support your brand in becoming loved by one particular type of person, because if somebody in the locality is having success there, they're going to tell other people their secret sauce and that they have found this place to get some great work done. It's not easy work to turn around, especially when you as a person are kind of basically publishing or broadcasting. People need to be in the right frame of mind. They need to feel comfortable. They need to be around people they feel comfortable with them seeing them filming and things like that. So there are all these little elements just to put yourself into the mindset as to what the person doing this type of work might take into consideration when they're looking to choose somewhere to work, Do you think that there is any co-working that the traditional co-working space might actually be unintentionally kind of working against creators, unbeknownst to the operators?
Yeah, potentially in the fact that they were never the consideration when the initial design was made for the space. Again, it's all about the evolution. We're going through a massive evolutionary part of this industry is rapidly changing. And again, that's all we're doing is exploring potential clients that you could draw in. And you need to do this in your space. If it's designed as a traditional co-working space, you may need to get creative. I think, if you're a space that's after attracting, how would I say, a lot of, people that talk on the phone, if that can create a cacophony of noise around the place. I know here in our own space, there's certain rooms that you just cannot do what we're doing right now. Because somebody decides to, give somebody a rapturous hello as they come in the door, then that's going to get picked up. And so the other side of it is how's the space built? Is soundproofing something you considered? Probably not. If it's in a lot of instances, co-working spaces are literally just scrambling all the cash together to get the doors open. So maybe it's a funding thing. Maybe it's the well-funded co-working spaces may not find it so difficult.
And if it might be the case, you may say we don't have the budget to do a dedicated space for creators, and I would ask the question, can you afford not to do it? Because if you're either missing the audience altogether, which is a huge audience, or potentially maybe they're in your space already and they're kind of misusing existing resources. So for example, we have 2 meeting rooms today booked, right, to do this. By rights, if there was one podcast studio set up, one room would do the job for us, So it might actually, somebody trying to over-engineer what you have available just to make it work for them might actually be limiting what you could do if you just had a few little tweaks to your space. And I don't think it needs to be drastic either, what's required, bit of soundproofing on the walls. You can get panels on well-known retailers who are not locally based, so I'm not going to call them out. But there's ways to do it. I think if you took a step back and considered, if that person walked into your space in the morning and said, come here, I want to shoot a bit of content and I make this many videos in the week, and this is what it could mean for your space, how much work would you have to do to cater to them, curious, right? So if somebody did go down that road then, and they said, all right, what could I do or they had a conversation maybe with somebody in this industry and they wanted to attract them in. Naturally, you're not going to build a space for one person. You're going to build a space for one audience and then look to get multiple of that audience. So in terms then of setting about attracting that audience member in, I think it's worth addressing that, because it's all well and good to say, have you considered? And then operators might say, yes, I have considered it, but I don't know where to find them. Where would you start?
Online, look at your Instagram accounts. This is the thing, you mentioned there a while ago, ask clients in your space what they're doing. Better again, just go on and find them online and follow them and see exactly what they're doing and how they're producing stuff,
Yeah, rather than clients, new people. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Again, so see who's in your locality, who's producing what close to home could be an easier way to go. One of the things I don't think we touched on was the equipment. The room and the space is one thing, you either have it or you don't. The next piece is the equipment, which is an absolute black hole for the likes of me. I don't know a good mic from a bad mic. I can read reviews like anybody else, but it's always handy to have somebody, some gadget nerd who's based in the space to give you a bit of a heads up. Somebody who knows a little bit about production, who can give you a helping hand and all of that. Or maybe you have somebody on site who can do it all for you. That would be great as well. So there's the space is one thing, the equipment's another, and potentially a member or a staff member who can, maybe it's an additional service that you provide along with renting the room.
Absolutely. And maybe that's something else you add into the conversation, because a lot of these people know what it is they need themselves. And if you can put an edge on the equipment available, if you have something that's a little bit over a higher budget than what they would have themselves, like you mentioned earlier, they might have not invested themselves quite yet. Maybe if it's the case that you can get some recommendations from them and be able to offer equipment that's a slightly higher spec, it's another way to attract people into.
Yeah, but I just had another thought there while you were saying that, is that you can focus on the people that are already creating content. But the other thing then is, maybe there's an element of, if you put the space in, maybe you can encourage people who never produce content to promote their business. Maybe you can plant the seed there, plant the idea. Because look, I think the world we live in now, I think you have to be producing content in some shape or form to build that brand awareness.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
And that's industry agnostic, really,
Absolutely. And that opens us up into the conversation then about, if you decided to go down this road, what might come next, and that's exactly it. Like if you have become, I suppose, a chosen or a proven name for providing this type of service, it becomes something you can advertise. I think one way to draw in more of the same audience will, of course, be word of mouth. If people are having a positive experience, given that it's locally based, or if somebody is landing in, if they're traveling and they're landing into your locality and they do this type of work, they're going to have a look online at where other, I don't want to call them influencers simply because I actually think that word's a bit, it's evolving and I think it's kind of misconstrued, and there's a lot of, you can be an influencer in your 50s for gardening, you know, it doesn't actually mean, I think, what it traditionally started out meaning. It's evolving, so I'm slow to use it. But that's one element. And then to your point, absolutely, it's a space, becomes a space then that you can advertise to traditional businesses. And the other thing I would see as a huge opportunity is start to educate people in your locality on what this type of work might look like. So they might run events for you. They might run, you know, TEDx talks or whatever the case might be, and start to just give people the opportunity to get started in that industry. I think a lot of people now, you know, we're in a bit of a gig economy, but we're also in a space where people are curious about the personal brand. They're curious about ways to earn themselves multiple revenue streams, all that good stuff, without getting into any bro talk. But it's something that is becoming more and more common. And if your brand of co-working space can be seen as one that supports people to make a bit of a shift or add something in to their skill set, and you're helping people to improve, it's probably a really strong direction for your brand to go to stay relevant as the model of work continues to change, because you're staying very up to date with the way that people are actually working nowadays, you know. In turn, that benefits companies and brands because you're making a group of employees far more comfortable being visible, you know, speaking about the work that they do, and promoting themselves, which we're all in the business of that, whether we like to think about it or not. In terms of the actual membership model, Graham, how would it look in practice? What kinds of plans do you think might make sense for this type of worker?
I mean, you'll have the pay as you play piece, you know, and I think there's an overlap with things like podcast studios and maker spaces. You could maker spaces, you generally become a member of the maker space, and then you pay for renting the equipment, and maybe getting that hands-on that kind of hands-on assistance from on staff on site, as well as consumables. So, you know, you're paying for the 3D printer, you're paying for the plastic or whatever you print it with. So maybe there's an element of that with podcasting as well, in podcast studios, and that, like, you know, do you have really good headphones, really good you know, I suppose mics will come standard, but is there additional pieces that you can rent? You know, like if I come with my own headphones, you know, fine, but for an extra $5 I can rent, you know. So there's an element of pay as you play, or is there a you know, pay a standard membership fee plus services on top? But again, maybe that's the best way to fund the fact that it may be empty for there may be excess time available in the space over the month, you know. It actually brings me on to another thought I had. I came across in LinkedIn this week. There was a chap talking about getting access to day offices, you know, and we see day offices becoming more and more popular as a concept. But there was some really well-known operators kind of winged in on it and said, look, the empty space is always the most expensive space in a location. So they kind of pushed back and said day offices are a great idea, but they're really expensive if I don't sell the time, when I could have a fixed tenant in there and I could be generating recurring revenue. You have a similar thing with podcasts, with studios. They're going to take up a bit of space. Would you make more money just leaving as a meeting room and having equipment on site that you could, is the interplay here a soundproof meeting room that has equipment you can roll out? You know, so it's all about, again, throwing on that creative hat that you mentioned earlier, so that it fits within the business model. So yeah,
my 2 cents on that one: set up the podcast studio, market it. How you do one thing is how you do everything. If you have kind of, I have one, but I have to set it up for you, somebody's just going to not go there, is my personal
Fair
take.
enough.
And
Fair
if
enough.
somebody wants to use it for a meeting room, absolutely drive on, no problem. You know, even if you're doing calls, it's actually better to be in a formal setup with nice mics and stuff. If it's an important call, that reflects well too. And if your meeting is important enough that you're going to pay for a meeting room, no harm to have a decent setup. I think if you make your model that you can walk in off the street and use this well set up spot with nice equipment, feels professional, that becomes your edge. Because I suppose that the nature of working as an operator seems to be that things are just so busy. It'll be the one day that you're not there to set it up and nobody knows how to work the mic, and so I'd be thinking set yourself up for the longer term. That's my take personally.
So what are your key takeaways from all of this, Anne-Marie?
My key takeaways are this is a growing audience, well worth considering. I wouldn't be underestimating them as a group. And I wouldn't be underestimating the value of this industry moving forward and the reality that it's going to grow. And if anything, if you're thinking about your co-working brand being for the long term, rather than aligning it with brands who have employees in your space, I would be aligning my co-working brand with the employee and whatever that person decides to do. So if somebody starts to work for themselves in addition to their work, or if they start a new business or whatever the case might be, I still want them coming into my co-working space. So if I get to know them and their personalities, and I think this is the type of work they might look to do, then I definitely want to have something in-house that will cater to them. And if I'm a person who's looking to bring in new audience members, and I know that there are people out there doing this type of work in my area, and a quick search online is going to verify the size of that market for you, then they're definitely an audience that I would look to cater to if I had the facility to do it. I think there's a lot of dead space in co-working spaces, whether we like to admit it or not. And I think the place that thrives is the one that stays on top of what the different spaces and corners are being used for. And maybe 6 months ago it was cool as an idea breakout space, but actually nobody sat there in 4 months. So we're going to change it up. We're going to make it into, we're going to put paneling on the walls. We're going to change it up and make it useful for something else. That'd be my take with this audience in particular. How about you?
I think you had a good point there. You don't half-ass it. If you're going to do it, do it. From this conversation, I think maybe, take a meeting room, soundproof it, have the equipment on the desk. I like that idea. And then promote it. And again, if you see more people going in there to have meetings, then do podcasts. Then maybe you sell the equipment and recoup your losses. But then the other thing is, do you really need one? Ask yourself that question. Do you really need one? If you're at 95% capacity, everybody's happy doing their thing, why upset the apple cart?
Well, here's my question. You might be at 95% capacity now. Where are you going to be in 3 years' time when everyone's working for themselves? Not saying that they will, but have you got a sense as to where the audience is moving, where the industries are moving, who's currently in your space, what's happening in your town, what are people doing? It's going to be specific to, if you're beside a couple of pharma manufacturing companies, and your whole team is, your member base are, a lot of people working for themselves who are serving those industries, they're probably not going to turn into influencers tomorrow. But maybe if you're in a city location, or you're in a town with, we've got some great seaside towns that have younger populations or older populations who want to be able to work for themselves and take in the outdoors, surf in the morning, hike in the afternoon, whatever the case might be. Those are the type of environments that are seeing people question the way they work, but they don't want to be out of the workforce. Just because you maybe don't align with the 9-to-5 model anymore doesn't mean you don't actually want to have a place to go to work. You don't want to give up the structure of having a place to work. So yeah, it's an interesting one. Look, I think hopefully we'll hear in the comments. Always have a chat with us if you've listened. We'd love to hear your take on this, because I'd imagine some people are going to listen and they're already doing this and they can give us their take on it, and others haven't even thought about it at all. It's something that's emerging, and I guess it's kind of a focused episode, right? Because we're talking just about this audience, because I know previously we talked about, have you considered students in your space? Like there's all these different types of groups to consider. this would definitely be my sense as to this group. If anything, we're a little bit late to the party. I mean, people are doing this work for years now, right? But
Yeah.
I think it's entering that adoption stage where you've got many more people starting to work for themselves. And they might be freelancing, or they might be working within 9-to-5 environments, and they still need to promote themselves, as we've covered. And then you have the people literally starting out brand new online.
I'd love a do's and don'ts with starting a podcast studio. Would love to hear what people have done, what's worked, what hasn't worked. Again, we're more talking about audiences and how to attract people to your podcast studio. I'd love to hear where people have failed and where they've succeeded, you know.
Absolutely. And for me, it's not just about a podcast studio, you see, because you could stand in a cool corner and record a live and get a couple of videos done for TikTok and Instagram. You don't need a podcast studio. You might only need the studio, twice in the month. And
So
exactly to your point.
You're way more done with the kids than I am. Like
I'm in the zone. I'm slightly closer. Not quite there, but closer to that threshold. Still not 30 under 30 though. I'll go for under 40.
I'd never ask.
And I won't say any more than that. Okay. That's enough for today now. Thanks, Emil, for tuning into this episode of Flex That Worx. We'll catch you on the next one. Thanks for tuning in to Flex That Worx. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to follow or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts so you don't miss our next episode. Connect with us on LinkedIn, watch the full episode on YouTube, and you can explore free tools and resources over at baseworks.co. This is Flex That Worx, powered by Baseworks, here to help you scale your workspace, making it simpler and less stressful.